There is a place within you older than time, a realm untouched by words, where images speak louder than logic and symbols shape your fate more than choices. It is the place Jung called the collective unconscious, a hidden architecture of the soul that we do not see, but which constantly sees us. It dreams through us. It suffers through us. It calls to us, quietly, persistently, in moments of fear, love, obsession, collapse. And unless we answer it, we remain puppets in a theater whose script we never wrote but are doomed to act out. Most people live unaware of this realm. They confuse personality with identity, impulse with truth. They build lives atop an ego that believes itself to be the whole psyche. But the ego is only a mask, a fragile surface floating above a vast inner world. Beneath it, the self waits, ancient, unknown, eternal. Carl Jung was not just a psychologist, he was a cartographer of this inner world. He did not simply analyze thoughts, he chased meaning. He listened to dreams not as random nonsense, but as messages sent from the depths of the unconscious. He saw myths not as fantasies, but as maps of the human journey etched into the soul. And he believed that within each of us lives a myth trying to be lived, an archetypal force seeking embodiment. What are these archetypes? They are not characters. They are not roles we choose. They are eternal patterns, primordial blueprints of human experience. They live within us the way instincts live within animals. They shape the way we love, fear, create, destroy. They are the great mother, the hero, the shadow, the child, the trickster, the sage. They are not invented. They are discovered, like bones buried in the psychic soil. You were born into a body, but you also inherited a psychic inheritance, a myth you didn't choose but must learn to carry. You carry the archetype of the father even if your father was absent. You carry the hero even if you feel broken. You carry the shadow even if you pretend to be good. These archetypes do not ask your permission. They live in your blood. They whisper through dreams. They haunt your patterns. And until you learn to recognize them, they will play out unconsciously, not as destiny, but as repetition. You are not simply a person. You are a vessel for timeless forces. When you fall in love, you are entering a field shaped by the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine forms. When you rebel, the trickster is alive in you. When you strive, the hero awakens. When you fail, the wounded child bleeds again. These are not metaphors, they are realities. Real as gravity, only hidden from the eyes. Modern life teaches you to look outward, at goals, screens, others. But Jung calls you inward, to the myth playing inside you. He asks, who is the God you unknowingly serve? What image are you projecting onto the world? What part of your soul have you abandoned in order to belong? Because beneath your behavior lies an archetypal code, and only by decoding it can you become free. We live in a world obsessed with personality, but Jung knew that the personality is a mask, persona, and every mask hides a face, and every face hides a wound, and every wound hides a door. That door leads downward, into the unconscious, and downward is the only path to the self. Not upward, not outward, downward, into the shadow, into the forgotten, into the truth. The psyche is not linear. It is not logical. It is circular, mythic, symbolic. Time does not move forward in it. It folds, spirals, collapses. In dreams, you are 10 years old and dying in your father's arms. In waking life, you feel nothing, but the archetype is moving, shaping your fate beneath awareness. This is why we repeat our traumas, why we fall into the same loves, the same losses, not because we are weak, but because something is unfinished, something is trying to complete itself. In the Jungian vision, your symptoms are not enemies, they are messengers. Anxiety is not a malfunction, it is the psychic alarm that something essential has been exiled. Depression is not a failure, it is the soul pulling your attention inward. Addiction is not about pleasure, it is about pain you cannot name. Every symptom is symbolic, every struggle is mythic, and until you translate them into meaning, they will rule you. We are mythological beings. You are not just a man or woman, you are also the hero, the seeker, the orphan, the lover, the destroyer. These figures do not come from stories, stories come from them. They are older than books, older than civilization. They are the language of the soul. This is why stories matter, why symbols move us, why we cry in films that remind us of something we never lived, yet somehow remember. The psyche knows, it remembers, it feels the archetypes even when the conscious mind denies them. That is their power, that is their terror, that is their beauty. You may think you chose your path, but more often it was chosen for you, by patterns older than your name. Until you become aware you are not choosing, you are reenacting. The same betrayal, the same silence, the same abandonment. Different names, same soul wound. But here is the truth. Awareness begins the alchemy. When you name the archetype, you loosen its grip. When you see the pattern, you create space. And when you listen deeply, the symptom becomes a teacher. The pain becomes a guide. The unconscious becomes conscious. And that, according to Jung, is the very definition of healing. To become whole is not to become perfect. It is to become integrated. Not to eliminate the dark, but to hold the dark in your light. Not to rise above your humanity, but to descend into it fully. Because it is only when you face what you fear most that you find the parts of yourself you lost long ago. You are not meant to be happy all the time. You are meant to be real. And realness is raw. It is complex. It is contradictory. You are joy and grief. You are rage and tenderness. You are shadow and light. You are a symphony of archetypes longing to be heard. This is the great work. This is the journey not to becoming someone else, but to becoming who you've always been beneath the noise. And in a world addicted to surfaces, choosing to know your depths is a revolutionary act. Because the most dangerous thing you can do in this life is not to fail, or to fall, or to be rejected. It is to remain unconscious of who you truly are.
When you gaze into the mirror, sometimes the face looking back surprises you. It's not the version of yourself you post online, not the professional avatar you present at work. It's the person at 3 a.m., touched by fear, doubt, loneliness. That person is real and vulnerable, and they carry the weight of an entire unseen world. They carry the shadow. Everyone has a shadow. It is not something dark and dangerous. You will not suddenly become a monster if you accept it. The shadow is simply the parts of you that you've been taught to hide. The hurt, the anger, the desires and imperfections you've locked in a basement called "not me." And there, they fester until they erupt. Maybe you've denied your anger at a friend's betrayal, but then snap at a stranger's careless gesture. Maybe you've dismissed your insecurities as irrational, only to obsess over the number of likes on a social post. Maybe you've painted yourself as kind and giving, but you're burned out, resentful, depleted. That is your shadow speaking through your behavior, through the cracks in your idealized image. Jung made a powerful claim. The shadow is the first bridge to wholeness, not because we want to live in darkness, but because light alone is incomplete. You cannot build a life of integrity over lies you tell yourself. A house of self-worth cannot stand without its foundation in truth. So, how do you meet the shadow? Begin with simple honesty. Notice your frustrations. Notice how your heart tightens when someone praises someone else, or when you hear someone say something you wish you'd said. What reaction surprised you today? What impulse felt too strong to belong to the real you? Ask, where did that come from? Then speak kindly to yourself. I see you. Not condemnation, not shame, but recognition. Even if it's just in silence, behind closed eyes, behind a locked door, whisper, I see my fear. I see my jealousy. I see my exhaustion. That voice of compassion cracks the basement door open, and in that moment, the shadow breathes. Integration doesn't happen in a day. It unfolds over years, moment by moment. You won't suddenly become someone else, but you begin to speak with integrity. You apologize where before you defended. You slow down when you used to sprint. You redress patterns not because you must, but because you have witnessed where they came from. Integration is messy. You will feel rage, guilt, grief all at once. You may cry during emails or withdraw in public. That's normal. It means you are touching something real. Don't push it away. Let it pass through you. Let the tears fall, let your chest ache, let your hands tremble. And when it's over, notice the horizon. Notice the ground beneath your feet. This work brings humans together more than it divides. You find experience mirrored in others. That lonely feeling at 3 a.m.? Someone else knows it too. The shame you felt at failing, it's shared. By letting the shadow out of your basement, you light a candle for others to see their way home. When your shadow is seen, it loses its grip. It no longer silently steers your decisions. Instead, it becomes a guide, a touchstone. Pain becomes a teacher. Patterns become clues. You stop reacting and start responding. With your newfound awareness, your relationships begin to shift. You speak truths you never dared to voice. You leave relationships that kept you small. You stop trying to fix people and start fixing your own reflection. The world doesn't change. You just change who shows up in your life. Your work in the shadow will call you to act, not out of fear or validation, but from deeper integrity. You may set new boundaries. You may say no when once you said yes. You may express your truth even if it disappoints others. And the reward? You become someone who can stand alone and still belong. You'll still feel lost at times, but you will be anchored in yourself even in the storm. That's the power of the shadow integrated. It's your dark foundation, no longer a trap, but an inner sanctuary. Rejection still hurts, mistakes still sting, but you are no longer defined by them. They become events, not your identity. You know your darkness, and still you choose to stay. That is courage. That is healing. That is becoming real. And beneath all the noise and images of perfection around us, that is what people crave most. Someone real. Someone who has seen their darkness and chose to remain present. Someone whose vulnerability shines louder than their mask. So, stargaze inside yourself. Find the hidden wounds, the old griefs, the silent shame. Speak them aloud. Let them breathe, and then step back and see them again. They are not you. They are pieces of you, fragments needed to complete the portrait. When you do this, two things happen simultaneously. The shadow softens and the light strengthens. Compassion becomes your default. Authenticity becomes your tone. Relationships deepen, not because others change, but because the emptiness inside you no longer seeks to fill itself outwardly. You become a presence, not a projection. The shadow stops being your enemy. It becomes your friend. And that is how you bring a human heart into a world afraid of its own darkness.
We live in a world where people often trade pieces of their soul for love, where silence is filled with scrolling and loneliness is dressed up as independence. In this world, the soul quietly aches, not for noise, not for praise, but for meaning. And while we chase approval,
validation, admiration, the most ancient part of us, the self, simply waits. It waits for us to remember who we are beneath the roles, the masks, the performance. It waits for us to return. Carl Jung didn't believe in coincidence. He saw everything, pain, loss, rejection, as symbolic, as meaningful, as purposeful. The things we avoid are often the very gateways we need to walk through to meet ourselves. And until we choose to walk through that threshold, life will keep bringing us back to the same wound, wearing different faces, different names, same lesson. That is the silent work of individuation, the most sacred journey a human can take. Not the journey to become what others want, but to become what you are at the core, the real self, not the ideal self. And that journey always begins with rupture, the collapse, the break, the heartbreak that refuses to be numbed, because within that raw pain, something ancient and eternal stirs. The soul finally awakening after years of being buried beneath compromises. It is in that moment, when we are stripped of everything we thought defined us, that a deeper identity starts to emerge. And that identity cannot be built by logic alone. It must be felt. We must descend into the inner underworld, the parts of us we were told were too much, too dark, too intense, and there begin to reclaim them, not as flaws, but as fragments of wholeness. The shadow is not evil. It is unacknowledged life. It is truth we've abandoned. It is the parts of us that were once rejected, now demanding to be integrated. Jung didn't teach us to eliminate the shadow. He taught us to dialogue with it, to listen, to embrace, because the moment we make peace with our inner contradictions is the moment we become whole. We stop seeking others to complete us because we no longer carry pieces of ourselves in exile, and the world senses it. There is a certain stillness, a certain gravity in a person who has stopped running from their own soul. They don't need to impress. Their presence speaks louder than performance. But this kind of presence isn't born from reading. It's not born from pretending. It's born from dying and being reborn, again and again, from every rejection, every betrayal, every moment we were asked to choose between our truth and our connection with others. When we finally choose truth, we stop bargaining with life. We stop asking, who do I need to become to be loved? And start asking, who am I really when no one is watching? That is the most terrifying and most liberating question we can ever ask ourselves. Because the moment we answer it honestly, we stop being fragments. We become fire. And in that fire, everything that was false burns away. What remains is unshakable. What remains is who we were meant to be. This kind of self-love isn't loud. It's not about mantras or mirrors. It's about reverence, a deep honoring of your own journey. Every scar becomes sacred. Every failure becomes a teacher. Every wound becomes an invitation. You no longer need a perfect past to deserve love. You only need the courage to sit with your pain without turning away. Wholeness is not about becoming flawless. It's about becoming true. And in truth, you will lose people. But what you will gain is the one relationship that will never abandon you, the one with your own soul. From that place, you begin to build a life not around what others expect, but around what your soul knows it needs. You don't just survive, you create. You don't just endure, you radiate. Because the one who has walked through the fire without numbing, without hiding, becomes a lighthouse for others. They become a presence that changes the atmosphere of any room they walk into, not because they demand it, but because truth is magnetic. And in a world full of echoes, those who dare to speak from their center become unforgettable. That is what Jung meant by individuation, that we each carry within us the blueprint of something entirely unique, not to be compared, not to be ranked, not to be judged, but to be lived. And the tragedy is that most people will die never having touched it, because they were too busy performing a life that wasn't theirs. But you are not most people. You are here, reading this, listening to this, because something in you refuses to die without becoming real. Something in you is tired of surface, tired of pretending, tired of being half-lived. That something, that ache, is sacred. It is the self calling you home, and you don't need to know every step of the journey. You only need to say yes. Yes to truth. Yes to depth. Yes to becoming who you really are, no matter the cost. That is the fire that will burn away every mask. That is the light that will guide you through the darkest corridors of your psyche. And once you've touched that light, nothing can dim it. Not rejection, not loss, not loneliness. Because once you've found yourself, you are never truly alone again. This is your call, not a call to become better, not a call to be perfect, but a call to be real, to stop abandoning yourself, to stop outsourcing your worth, to stop playing a role that keeps you loved but lost. You were not born to be small. You were born to embody your fullness, even if it terrifies those who cannot yet face their own. You were not made to be easily digestible. You were made to be whole. So here is your invitation. Step back into yourself. Return to the place within that never needed fixing, only remembering. You do not need to hustle for your worth. You do not need to earn your existence. You are already enough, entire, undivided. And the world is not waiting for your perfection. It's waiting for your truth. That is what people remember. That is what shifts lives, not the version of you that's been edited for approval, but the version of you that bleeds real. So become that. And if you're ready to go deeper into this journey, to awaken from the trance, to meet yourself beneath the noise, then join us. This space was made for souls like yours, souls that won't settle for half-truths, souls that ache for depth, for light, for liberation. Subscribe not just to this channel, but to your own transformation. Activate the bell not for algorithmic updates, but as a sacred reminder that you've chosen to wake up. Share this with someone who's been sleepwalking through their worth. And above all, come back again and again. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for you. Because when you become the home you've been seeking, everything changes. And the world, even in its chaos, begins to make sense again.